Ni hao, my name is Hannes Rubers for Heijlongjiang International University. In today's lesson of the online course EBS European Business Skills, we'll dive into Italian business culture. I would like to introduce you to a country I know well. I lived there twice. I studied there and had a company there. Let me explain you what Italy has to offer for us, or as the Italians say, Bella Italia. Ciao ciao.
Welcome to this video lesson on Italy. For each lesson, we have a different PDF. And because English is not always easy for you, what we have done is that inside this lesson reader Italy, you will find the complete transcript of every single word I say. So it's written out and it allows you to look up in the dictionary and find the Chinese translation. And that will help you to prepare and better understand the spoken English. 谢谢. The world is internationalized at an incredible pace, and this has consequences for China, and it might have consequences for you as well. At ATIU, we strive to help you prepare to take part in the global world, and you have to do so also by preparing culturally. EBS, European Business Skills, is a course that offers you detailed background information on all 27, since Brexit, 27 EU member states. We cannot do all of them in the video classes, but by the end of the online video course, we will have introduced you 7 of the more essential states in it. But of course, there are more. So what we've chosen to do is that the blue countries are introduced during the online classes. The yellow ones, which is not the entire EU, because for instance, Greece is not in it. But we'll try to introduce the yellow countries during live classes in Harbin during an intensive course. Let's take a look at future chances that Sino-Euro cooperation and collaboration has to offer us. And that's a lot. Looking at the statistics for trade in goods and commercial services, you'll see that actually not the US or China, but actually the EU is the world's largest importer and exporter as far as trade concerns. Myself, I used to work for the European Commission when just after leaving university, and I must be honest, it was very difficult. It was very difficult because of all the different cultural habits, languages, expectations, and it was not easy at all for me. But that's something that I could learn, and for now, it's easy for me to deal with a Hungarian, an Austrian, a Slovenian, or somebody from Estonia, and I also see the fun and the joy of it, and I hope that we're able to teach you things in this lesson that you don't have to make the mistakes, but to have the trouble that I had at the beginning, and you're a little bit better than I was. Because it pays off, but it's also work that you need to do. You need to develop a communication strategy, and you need to understand the building blocks of cultural communication across borders within the EU context. And for that, preparation is the key, and let's start with that. Today, it is important we do, because as I often tell, in the EU, we see that actually 40% of all pan-European projects, they fail. And they mainly fail because of intercultural miscommunication. This is validated research, the Elucidata report. This is really what it is. And if it's between Europeans that 40% fails, how much do you think it will be between Chinese and Europeans? Hence, we offer you EBS, European Business Skills, making you ready for the EU. Let's look a little bit at the background of the cooperation. After the Cold War between the West and the Soviet bloc, the relations with Europe were for Beijing not top priority. But we see that is changing because of the very intensive economic context, the investments because of the Belt Road Initiative, but also the Trump administration, which is going for a trade war. And this has led to a higher interest in a more multipolar system. And that means that one of these poles is the EU. If we look at the history of the Sino-European relations, that officially established in 1975, so just a year after President Nixon visited China. What we see is that the European External Action Service describes is that the EU and China aim for cooperation in the areas of peace, prosperity, sustainable development, and people-to-people exchanges. And that's you, and that's also me. A few years ago, in 2013, the EU-China 2020 Strategic Agenda for Cooperation was drafted. This is an official document, and as a result of that agreement, every year the EU-China Summit is being conducted at the highest possible level. So it's presidents or ministers of foreign affairs, and it's a very big agenda they talk about. It has a lot of changes as well each time. The EU actually is China's largest trading partner, so it makes sense. And also China is the EU's second largest market after the US. But we see that the economy is growing on a high level year after year in China. And soon China will be the EU's first market. And then in December 2019, the Chinese Foreign Affairs Minister Wang Yi called for the launch of free trade talks with the European Union. This is really substantial because if you have free trade agreements, an FTA as it is called, the reason of an FTA is that they actually make the markets united. The idea is that there is no more tax when entering in the country, so European products can go in without any tax into the Chinese market, vice versa. So that's very substantial. Normally, communication triples or doubles if there is an FTA signed. Here we see a picture of a recent EU-China summit. As you can see, it's a very high level. If we look at recent years, the European export to China grew by almost 15% on average every year. And we saw that during the Euro crisis, China bought for billions of Eurozone bonds, in particular from Greece, Ireland, Italy, Portugal, and Spain. And those economies were in heavy problems. Another thing is that we saw that just a few years ago, the European naval force, the Navy, and the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy held for the first time ever a joint military exercise in Djibouti. Now, obviously, we're going to have more and more communication, but more communication not necessarily means better communication. So the only thing that you can do is actually prepare. Now, this is a map of average Italian scores and average Chinese scores. For both countries, I can say that China is so big. There's so many different styles between north, south, east, west, Ubiur, everything. But also Italy has strong regionalism, and there's usually talk about the north-south divide, but I think there's even much more than that, if you know Italy. Well, maybe to go back a little bit, we can see that these little bulbs, these little bullets on the map have an average score, and we can see that China has much more of a collective society than Italy. On the other hand, America is here, so it will be fairly easier to work with Italians from a Chinese perspective than it is with people from Germany, the Netherlands, the UK, or the US. Now, as you can see, these are all there. Details of it you can find in the PDF, the lesson reader on Italian business culture. So let's learn some adapted strategies. In the reader I just referred to, you'll find all kind of specific communication functions explained. Please read, it will really help you better. And the combination of the background reader, the PDF, with this video lesson makes you very prepared for dealing with Italians. Just read or just do the video actually is not enough. They complement each other. So thanks for doing both. If you do that, what I would strongly suggest is that you self-reflect. And what we call gap analysis, is where you look at who am I, what is the other, and how can I bridge this divide? How can I best deal with it if I have this knowledge? And actually, that extra step is what in psychology we call internalization, and it's where you internalize the new knowledge and you try to do something with it. Just listening to the video is never enough. You need to work with it in your brain, in your heart, and in your guts, and that's what makes you better. Otherwise, it goes in and it goes out. The idea is that it stays in you, in your mind, in your heart, and in your brain. Good. Let's go to Italy. It's a country I love very much, and I hope that you can share this love with me. It's worth it. But in order to be effective, it needs some preparation. Let's take a look. Here we are, Italy. Ciao, which actually means I'm your slave in Old Italian. It's the dark green boot-shaped country at the south of Europe, totally in the Mediterranean, the beautiful sea in the south of Europe. Country code for phone calls is 39. The internet code is .it, and the time difference is, if it's midnight in Rome, it's already 6 o'clock in the morning in Beijing, so we have 6 hours time difference at the moment because we have daylight saving time, or as you call it sometimes, summertime. Rome to Beijing flight, 10 and a half hours, but you won't always be able to find direct flights, so then it will be a lot more. And the boot-shaped peninsula stretches 1,000 kilometers north to south. This is the Italian side of the euro coins. In Europe, a lot of countries have adopted the euro as the currency, and the banknotes are the same, but the coins have a European side and a national side, and these are the national Italian. And here we see, for at the bottom there, we see the Colosseo, you see Dante Alighieri, you see futuristic design. So a lot of beautiful elements of the rich cultural Italian history. This is the license plate. The white plate is showing the name of the city and the number, but the blue line on the left shows the European stars, and it also shows the letter I, the capital I, for Italy. Now, for France, it would be F, for Spain, it would be E, and for Belgium, it would be a B. And this is how we can recognize which country is driving within the European Union. All roads lead to Rome. This is an old saying, and it has to do with maybe the Roman Empire when it really was considered in the Western world caput mundi, which is Latin for capital of the world or head of the world. But also afterwards, it has always been a very strong, influential city with a very rich culture. And make no mistake, also religiously, it has been very influential because the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, is seated near the city of Rome, Vaticano. Rome is an amazing city, but there are many amazing cities in Italy. It's full of old historical beauty, amazing places you will learn to love, especially with the nice weather, the delicious food, and the cool fashion. Although there are many modern sites, very modernistic sites, also I noticed that in Italy people really admire tradition, and I quite like these tramways. They're not the modern high-tech, high-speed things, but they're so much fun with wood inside. They restore them, and where I would used to live in Milano, I could take this little tramway, and you like it. But also in Harbin, you can see some of China, some of Italy. When I was there last year, I saw the Colosseo, the old Roman Empire circus in Rome, very beautiful, carved out of ice stones. So let's take a look at some of the more societal things. When I first started to live in Italy, I realized that the way people manage time is not the same as where I was coming from. I come from a culture where time is broke up in very small compartments and schedules and procedures. And for people in Northwest, this is the surest route to efficiency. So we can predict exactly what is happening when, and we're very strict about time managing. Um, in Italy, I noticed that time is much more depending on events, but also on people. So if I was meeting with people, I would get nervous and say, okay, well, look, we got to go. And I noticed that people didn't really think that positive about it. And it made me slowly change my system of how to deal with time. So time efficiency is sometimes secondary to the relation. And that's something I had to learn. So time is something that is very flexible and very fluid. Um, a strict punctuality is not always the best choice for the Latin world. Now, what this means to is that my schedule at the beginning of the day, I would write down on a piece of paper, and maybe you do it on your phone nowadays, is that I would plan things, I would have my lunch, but the reality was that things would shift. People would arrive late because of the difficult traffic in the city. Lunch would take longer. Maybe we'd drink some wine with lunch. And so the period after was a bit cozy. We would passeggiare, walk a bit, and time would shift. And meetings I would have at the office actually were part of the happy hour, where we would have drinks and bites. It was a lot of fun in the bar, but actually it was part of work and the relationship building. And this is something that I had to develop. But it's a skill I would say you need to be successful in Italy. I have a small video clip where we see how Berlusconi is meeting with Angela Merkel, and we see some different expectations and behavior. Now, of course, Berlusconi is not the average Italian, everybody knows that, but still. Now we get the picture. Yeah, different expectations. Of course, Berlusconi is someone special, but still, punctuality in Germany is very different from punctuality in Italy. Trust me. Um, Something that I remarked is a very different thing, but I noticed that everywhere there is the lotto, and there are so many times a week there is a draw. It's a very big tax income, and everywhere you see people playing the lotto. It's actually also the numbers are in the telegiornale and the daily news television show. Um, Another topic that I would like to mention is the regionalism in Italy. Italy is a country that has only recently been established in 1870. After that period, we see Garibaldi and Cavour, two influential politicians, statement that created the unity of Italy. But the feeling of regionalism is still very, very strong. Like Corriere della Sera, which is one of the main newspapers in Italy, they did a research on marriages, and they noticed that people that were interregional, so from different provinces, if you like, um, that the divorce rate were very much higher. And according to the newspaper, this was because of the local cuisine. It's a joke, but the regionalism in Italy is very strong. And we also see it in the language. Around half of the Italian population, they speak as a mother tongue a regional dialect. So not the average Italian. Many dialects are considered separate languages, although this is not officially recognized. But to give you an example, in the First World War, which for Italy, yeah, was very disastrous in a lot of ways, a lot of people got killed. But some two Italian pelotons, they attacked each other because they heard people talk and they thought it was a foreign language and they started to shoot at each other, but they were actually both Italians. Um, if we stay with the topic of language, because Heijlongjiang International University is very strong with languages, we should include that. The use of language in Italy is somewhat different from more Asian language use. It's very Barockish. So it means you use a lot of nice words, a lot of special words that maybe also can show your level of knowledge and education. If you can make things complex, it shows you've had that education, and that as such offers kind of quality or maybe even protection. Um, I see that not many people in Italy speak foreign languages, let alone English. Um, so, as a result, or maybe because of that, people also use more body language, non-verbal communication. The movement of the hands, the face, the whole body is very expressive. And this is something that works well if you do it, because if you stay stiff, Italians may be also feeling that you're a little bit of a boring robot. So my advice is to see what people are doing and try to assimilate and try to maybe mimic that style a little bit because it will make you more expressive. Here we see some people on the street, but look at it, the hand gestures. They're everywhere. Um, and there you go. Let's try this one. It is an important gesture. It's part of your expression. If you don't, you look like an ice cube that has no feeling. And here we see former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi using the hand. And here we have the present Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. But there's more. I take again a German example because both Italy and Germany are very big member states in the European Union. If we see how a meeting is conducted, then we see that Germans or Scandinavians or the Dutch, they like to have very compartmentalized elements of the meeting where you're supposed to talk about a certain item and then it stops. We see very clear expectation of what the meeting should be like. Whereas in the Italian meeting style, we see two things. We see mainly the word verbose, which means beautiful language, and we see flexibility. So apparently, the quality of language and improvisation and creating a nice atmosphere is very, very important, and showing the knowledge and an ongoing conversation at high level with high intensity. The second thing that we see is that the graph is much higher. And if it gets higher, it means there is more volume. And there's more volume when there's more emotion. So louder language, beautiful language, emotional language are all necessary elements in a successful meeting behavior. I think this part to improvise, to be spontaneous, to be emotional, for most Chinese will be a challenge. Maybe you rather be shy. Maybe you rather not make a mistake because of the English. These are elements in your normal attitude that will not work well in Italy. So you need to establish this kind of easiness in a kind of more positive, happy, accogliente. You have to be also emotional and loud. Can you do that? What we also see is that it's okay, according to the Italian score, to disagree, to say no in public. And we also see the Chinese score, which is really at the back. Are you able to debate with people? Are you able to disagree and explain why you disagree? I think this is not part of the Chinese culture. And will be a necessity in order to convince parties in Italy. And in Italy, it is a positive trait to the Italian society allows people to be very emotional and disagree in public. So you should maybe not be offended, but you should learn how to do this. And it is okay. And that is what we see here. Here is plenty of emotion, but we also see the expressiveness of the language, and we see the use of the hands, the nonverbal communication. The lady is moving her hand all over while the man is standing like a statue. Can you be both elegant and expressive? This is part of the culture, especially in the South, but it yields better results if you communicate this way. There's another element, and this is already part of what I said, that you can disagree, and you can disagree with others, and you can disagree with society, and that means the rules. Italians prefer to reason, ragionare, argomentazione. These are the reasoning why. And you explain this, and you do this with a lot of passion, with your hands, with a lot of voice and intonation. And it is okay and it is positive. Why I can be above the rules. The red light in Italy is actually an Italian invention, and maybe that's why people don't care. A red light in Harbin, I would not dare to cross. But in Italy, it is maybe a national sport. Sometimes you're not allowed to park double. If there's a car parked, you're not allowed to park next to that. Sometimes the complete street can park double in Rome, and yeah, that is the handicap of a very historical old city center. But there is also a ragionare argomentazione. Any rule is subject to analysis. You will ask why? Why is this rule? Why is it for me not a red light, but maybe a green or a dark green light? Another thing is that people like to share beauty in beautiful architecture, beautiful food, beautiful cars, beautiful fashion, and also the way people address each other should have some of this class element. Elegance is important. Now, how are you elegant? Well, because you are presidente. If we check the amount of cards that I have, my business cards, many of them have the word presidente on it. But sometimes people are presidente of nothing. So it is important to, look nice. It's the bella figura. So many times people are called dottore, professore, avvocato, even if you're not. So if you're not a lawyer, you can still be called avvocato, which means lawyer, dottore, which means doctor, or professore. These are part of the good style. You have to always try and strive to make the best possible impression. This is called La Bella Figura. And Beppe Severnini wrote a beautiful book about it, which is also available in English, maybe even translated to Chinese, but if not, good chance to study for you in English. You have to mind your behavior in public. You have to be nice, simpatico. You have to care about public interaction and try to avoid la brutta figura, a bad impression. So it's very important that you always try to look nice, behave nice, talk nice, and give a good public appearance. Very important in Italy, and that's why maybe fashion, cars, and everything like to shine so much. And this is the brands also, and a lot of the nice shops you will find back in the malls in Harbin are also Italian. And in fact, the contribution of Chinese consumers to the luxury market is upscaling year after year. And we see that a larger percentage of the world total of luxury goods is actually nowadays Chinese, and it's keep on growing. We also see the influence of China in Italy. Some 200 big Italian businesses are now controlled by Chinese owners. And I don't mean a Chinese restaurant in Rome. I mean a company that has been bought by Chinese capital. Only the United Kingdom has attracted more Chinese money for acquisitions in Europe. So takeovers by Chinese financial means, Italy is the second. The national newspaper La Repubblica, it states that the Chinese central bank hold stakes in many Italian blue chips firms, essential firms. Fiat is one of the largest car producers in the world. Is a large part of the shares is now owned in China. Telecom Italia, which is the national telephone provider. Generali, which is a huge international insurance company. And A&E, which is the electricity company for Italy, are partly in Chinese hands. We also see that quite recently, March 2019, Italy and China, they signed a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, on Belt Road Initiative, One Belt, One Road. Italy is now the first G7 member to join Belt Road Initiative. This is a very important political impact because it's quite different from the EU-China 2020 strategic agenda that the European Commission has drafted, and Italy is going way towards China, which is very different from countries like Germany or others. We also see that China is very interested in the infrastructures of the ports of Trieste and Genoa, which allow Chinese companies um, a possibility to turn these ports, the harbors, into Euro-Asiatic hubs. And the boats can come there, but there's also direct access to European railway networks. So yeah, the Belt Road Initiative starts also in Greece. It's very strong. We also see there's an Istituto Italiano Obor, which is the Italian Obor Institute. It still, unfortunately, uses the old name and not the Belt Road Initiative, but it's there. It has also offices in China. What is Italy in the global context? Well, the four Fs: food, fashion, furniture, and Ferrari. And usually it's all the alta cucina, the good food, the expensive fashion, the expensive kitchens or high quality design furniture, and of course the beautiful cars. G7, it's still the fifth manufacturing economy in the world. So Italy is a big producer of goods. It's the third largest economy in the euro area, although at the moment, financially, it's very unstable. But it still has strong exports, 500 billion euro of goods and services. If we look at the manufacturing sector per capita, so it means per head of the population, then Italy is actually the fourth in the world, which is very, very high. And we can see that China is much more to the right. That's because China has so many inhabitants. Of course, China produces much more than Italy, but if we count per capita, Germany, Japan, South Korea, and Italy are the leading economies in the world. If we look at the salary per hour within the European Union, we actually see that Italy is not so expensive. On the other hand, countries like Bulgaria and Poland and Romania, the Central and Eastern European economies are much, much more cheaper, the labor cost. Small is beautiful. And what this means is that, and you see the triangle of little red dots in the north of Italy, this is where all the small and medium sized enterprises are. So it's not the huge international multinational like Alibaba and Tencent, but much smaller ones. And they actually make up more than 2/3 of the Italian manufacturing. And the large Italian companies are less than 10% of the production. So apparently, the small and medium sized enterprises in Italy are where the work and where the money comes from. And this model, which has been discovered in the 90s in Italy, is what the European Union is trying to now also parachute all over the European Union. If we look back, what is attractive for Italy and what are still some weaknesses that we can see? Food and fashion, they are amazing. It is you're happy every day if you eat, and you can shop at very reasonable prices in Italy. The cultural heritage, the number of worldwide, it's the number one worldwide for UNESCO World Heritage Sites. There is so much beautiful art to see that you will enjoy. The market size, Italy is the 10th largest world market. So it pays off to invest in the Italian economy because it's big enough. Some of the weaknesses is that it's very bureaucratic. It is slow. The costs are high. The tax system is a swamp. It is really, it's untransparent. It's very bureaucratic. It's a problem. Italy is number 158 in the Doing Business report. So it is really not a very flexible and open business world, but still, yeah, it is doing better year by year. Also, we can see that Italy is one of the most over-legislated countries on earth. It means that it has a lot of laws, and these laws are very rigid. In fact, Italy has 12 times more laws than Germany, and I'm impressed because Germany has a lot of laws. Another point is the corruption perception index. Often people complain that aesthetics are more important than ethics, and that is a point. Because a score of 72, although at the moment it's going towards the 50s of 180 countries, it is one of the countries with the highest corruption perception in the European Union. Sai Komeye. It means you know how it is. This is what people can say when something is not the official regular way. It is possible in the Italian way. So you have a rule, but you also have under the rule. So a lot of people have a tendency to avoid rules and laws. Like I told you with the red light in traffic, it is a national sport in Italy to not pay your tax. But the government needs income, and tax is part of that. So with this income, you can make good hospitals, cure corona people. It costs money, and you need money. Yeah, that is a reality. There's another problem, especially in the south. It's the mafia, the Cosa Nostra, the Camorra, then the 'Ndrangheta. Depending on the area, sometimes it's called mafia, sometimes it's called Camorra. Um, Italy has estimated to have the biggest black economy in Europe. Manfredi states in a book that the GDP, the turnover of the 'Ndrangheta, is the same as Tencent and Alibaba together. And the 'Ndrangheta is just one of the mafias. There's more. Totally, we're talking about just maybe 155 families that control 60,000 people in 30 countries. The omerta is the duty to be silent. If you tell to the police or to the government, then you will be killed. If we look back why the mafia is there, it's usually the occupied south. You have to understand that the south of Italy has been a Spanish colony for 100 years or more. And in this occupation, the colonialization of south of Italy, there was, of course, a black market. And this black market stayed when we got the United Italy, the Italian state. Then we have Gerardo Colombo. He was the famous judge in the Operation Clean Hands after the Bettino Craxi, the corruption which was discovered and which totally changed the landscape of Italian politics. He is now giving 300 lectures a year. I think that's a lot because I know what a lecture is. He teaches young Italians on democracy and most of all on what is legal and what is illegal. And he feels that rules do not count enough in Italy, and that's why Colombo is speaking at all universities nonstop. Let's a happier image, and let's leave the difficult topic behind and go into traffic. Now, traffic in the historical cities is ruthless hysteria and hierarchy. People love to honk their klaxons. They can do entire symphonies. They make music on it. They cry, they whisper, they yell, they protest in their cars. It's funny to watch, but it's a cacophony of noise. It's also pure adrenaline. And as you can see by the cars, I don't see this happening yet in Harbin, but it's also fun. And because it's so crowded, because they're old cities, thousands of years old, sometimes the Vespa is the best way to move around, the little motorcycles and scooters. Another topic is that just like maybe in China with Guangxi, you need to have a relationship. A purely business relationship doesn't exist in Italy. You have a relationship or you don't have a relationship. And that means that you need to invest first in getting to know the other. I think for Chinese, this is easy because you have that yourself. But the way it's done, it's maybe a little bit different. People might invite you with the family, or maybe you go to the garden estate outside of the city. It is not about efficiency. It is really about taking time to do fun things together. You'll be drinking delicious red wines, grappa, all kind of other things. But the idea is also to have, quality time together. And the conversation will be animatissima, so really emotionally fun, and involved. Um, in Italy, the family is essential. There's 22 million families in Italy, and they are an institution. But they're also a life insurance. They're also a bank. You have to realize that economy has not always been friendly the last decades in Italy, and it's usually the family that takes care of the people because the state is not always capable of taking that role. If we look at the first loan that people get to buy a house, 90% is actually coming from the family, la familia, which is very opposite of what we see in northwestern countries, where you see people get a loan from the bank. 40% almost of the society gets the first job via the network. This is maybe the same in China. It's a network society like Guangxi. The family also has another, there's something. At the moment, we see that 50% of the parents in Italy share the house with the children. But sometimes these children are 35 or 38 years old. They're grown ups. And this is in America is 70%, in the Netherlands is 12%. And the why of it is that there's hardly any rental apartments. It's not always easy to find a job when the economy is not at its best. And sometimes it's also just attractive to have, a lifestyle where la mama is cooking delicious food. You have a room, and all the money you have, you can spend on, you know, your bella figura and your great looking clothing. But I've met some friends that at night they're the heroes in the discotheque and the restaurants, but at night they have to really silently enter the home because they don't want to wake up daddy who needs to go to work the next morning. So this is called figli mamoni. It is a big problem. It's boys that stay with the family because they have a nicer life and they don't work. It's not always easy to find a job, but it's a bit of a problem. And as a result, actually, with these guys hanging around the house and doing nothing, Italy now has one of the lowest birth rate and fertility rates in the world. And actually, it's expected to shrink 25% by some years from now. This is a serious problem for the Italian society. Another thing is that Italian culture is across the world. We see that the majority actually of the emigration was to America. And maybe you think of Little Italy in New York City, and a lot of Italians went to North America, but the majority actually went to Argentina or to Uruguay and maybe Chile. So these cultures that have a bit the same climate, let's say the real wine countries in South America, they are very much like Italy. And there was a time that Buenos Aires, the big city in Argentina, after the Second World War, almost half of the population was born in South Italy. And their language, the Spanish they speak, is very much influenced by Italian. Some to stayed within Europe, but the majority is actually going to America, maybe a bit to Australia. Let's talk about food. Food is important in China, but it's also really important in Italy. If I look at the supermarkets in China, I don't see so much Italian products. I hardly see any olive oil or tomato paste. But I think you would enjoy it because a lot of the Italian food is maybe by Marco Polo somehow influenced and inspired by Asian food. But what I noticed is that the Italians are really patriotic. They love their own food. They only like to eat la cucina italiana, the Italian kitchen. The food that we usually call Italian is actually street food. Things like pizza is not real food, it's street food. It's snacks that students eat. It's not Italian alta cucina, the beautiful kitchen. To have pasta with meat, it's embarrassing for an Italian. A lot of times, the Italian food that you can buy is never made by Italians. They would turn around in their graves if that was called Italian food. The real food in Italy is very sacred. You don't make jokes about it. Italians spend a lot of yuan per year on food. Food is very, very, very important in Italy. Average consumption of pasta is about 25 kilograms per person per year, which is a lot. And la spaghetti and la pasta, they're sacred. You don't make jokes about pasta. You treat it with respect. Maybe a bit like in China. Maybe a joke. So if pasta is so important, that's also why dogs can have pasta naturale, pasta precotta, and riso soffiato. Pasta. Another thing besides the pasta maybe would be the cafe, the Italian coffee, Cafe Italiano. I love it. I cannot live without it. I need to have my espresso. I need to have my cappuccino or cappuccino, as most people say, but I call it cappuccio. But the good thing about the cappuccio, so that's the foamy milk with the strong shot of espresso in it, you only will take it until the late morning, and after that, it is not good. It's what tourists do. You won't order a cappuccino after dinner. It's ridiculous. It's immoral. This is a funny anecdote. The Italian astronauts had to go to space, and they didn't want to go without a real, an espresso. And I understand. When I travel, I also have a little espresso pump in my thing, and then all I need is hot water. I can make a good coffee. But this machine is making a hot, delicious, strong coffee in a small cup. But cups don't work in space because it would float anywhere. So they have a heat protective plastic bag from which you can sip out your espresso. And that's how we got the Italian astronauts into space. Yeah, there you go. So we leave the food behind. I would like to invite you to take another look at the reader. For every lesson at EBS, we'll have a PDF, and this PDF contains good background reading material on that country. And the things I mention now in the lesson are not the same things that you will find in the reader. So they're complementary. You need both the water and the salt. It's always easy if you don't speak Italian. I noticed that not a lot of people speak English. It's getting better, but it's still, a desert linguistically. So it helps if you would learn a few words in Italian. Well, the good news is at HIU, we have everything available for you. There is a fantastic group of people teaching you. There's very good connections to Perugia, a beautiful city in Italy. And as you can see in building 3, sometimes the Italian flag is waving opposite of the Chinese flag. Allora, è venuto il tempo di dire ciao ciao, è stato un piacere di explain to you a little bit about the Italian way. I hope that you will enjoy the country, that this lesson will help you, that the reader information will help you, and I look forward to our next lesson of EBS. Shishi, grazie mille.